All right, so today we have Matthew Glickman. He is co-founder, CEO of a new startup called Genesis Computing, which you can find at genesiscomputing.ai. The taglines from the website are enterprise-ready AI data agents, and also delivers AI data agents with advanced built-in skills to securely automate your most critical data workflows. No building, no custom coding, just results from day one. And with that, welcome to the podcast, Matthew.
Awesome, Ben. Great to see you again. And like I said, it's been 10 years since we last did one of these, so great to be back.
Obviously, we've seen each other several times between then. Most recently at this year's Agent Conference in New York,
Yes.
of which we'll have another one. I'll talk to you more about it offline after this, Matthew.
Yep. Awesome.
All right, so obviously to establish your credentials here, you were at Goldman for many years, and then you went to the, I guess, the rival company, Snowflake, where you headed product for many years. And I guess, as many of the listeners know, full disclosure, I am an advisor to Databricks, but we won't be talking about those companies here. We'll be mostly talking about what Matthew's doing at Genesis, but more broadly, data agents in general. So to start off with, obviously you've been around Goldman, like I said, Snowflake. After you left Snowflake, obviously lots of things that you could have been doing or building. So what specific problem to lack of no pun intended, what's the genesis of Genesis Computing?
That's perfect. The name works now. No, great question. And like you said, we could have done anything, but in reality, I really believe how you start these things and how you decide to make changes in your career, like life presents you opportunities and you either take them or you ignore them. And I believe not ignoring them. And for the same reason, what drove me to leave Goldman and join Snowflake, right? The cloud tsunami was coming, and I saw that there was an opportunity where I could take what I had learned running quant data teams at Goldman, bring that expertise to Snowflake. I actually was the person who brought both Databricks and Snowflake into Goldman, who was one of the first financials for both, and helped both companies, interestingly enough. But I saw that opportunity, and I saw how I could help. Similarly, as the AI wave started to sweep over us all, particularly in the enterprise space, I saw an opportunity, and particularly with customer meetings I was having where every customer I was having at Snowflake at the time was basically struggling with seeing these glimmers of opportunity of what they could use to unlock their data teams using, at the time, GPT-4. And they would make these incredible demos and then hit a wall. And everyone was trying to now build, the framework around these powerful models to unlock their data teams who were the bottleneck in data projects, data engineering builds, providing data products for their business users. And each one of these was trying to assemble these from the pieces. And we realized, my co-founder, Justin Langseth, and I realized that given what we knew about the space, why not build this once and build it in a way that all these enterprises could use and really take advantage of this new AI technology.
So
we started to.
So GPT-4, I guess this is post ChatGPT, right?
Right.
So by that, so GPT-4, you're saying at that point, enterprises and financial services in particular were already playing around with some notion of automation.
Right. They were playing around with it, and they had this immense pressure from their CEO and leadership to produce something with AI, right? And that something was ill-defined, but they all were creating these killer demos of, I can ask my data this question, or I could, transfer my business, and they, with this dashboard that comes up on the fly. Whatever it was, these were very great demos, but they would work, 3 times out of 5, or they would work half the time, or they would give wrong answers, and they would all hit this wall. But they saw that there was something powerful here. But that same expression where the last 10% of a project is always the hardest. In AI, it actually gets very, very steep, very, very fast.
So when you read these headlines or see results of surveys which say, hey, there's a lot of AI usage, but people get stuck and never deploy to production, that resonates with you.
This is the problem. It's exactly the problem. I think everyone, and we all get fooled, and I've been there. You all get fooled because of these demos are so compelling that you feel like given where I've reached this demo, it can't be this hard to get to this last place. And because of this technology being non-deterministic, it's actually incredibly hard to get that last 10% of value. The second thing that we see is everyone focuses on the sexy use case, right? Putting an AI in front of my customer, putting an AI in front of my CEO, and having them basically kind of, go and ask an open-ended kind of exploration. And the problem with that use case, it's very asymmetric in its risk profile, where if it works, great, but if it doesn't, it's a disaster. So even if it performs well 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100 times, right? That tail is actually a disaster. Which is why, and again, I get it, why everyone focuses there. It seems like a sexy problem. Like, let's create an AI financial analyst, right? All those things seem like a great idea.
Or I guess the other one is the AI investment banker.
Exactly. Right? Sounds like a great idea.
By the way, Matthew, just to interrupt you here for a second, but that last 10%, if you were to describe that last 10% to our listeners, would that be mainly accuracy? What is that last 10%? If you were to break it down, yeah.
I think it's reliability.
Reliability.
I think accuracy is kind of is more of an old-fashioned term, because that assumes that you're going to get
predictability, right? So
right.
I guess there's that whole thing where I don't mind if it's only 80% accurate as long as I know the 20% where it's not accurate.
Right, and I know when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Where the problem here is, you could test it, and this is where these models can fool you, because it will seem like it gets it so well, and it's almost like you're observing like a brilliant, child prodigy. Like, it wows you, so you basically say, well, I got this, right? This is going to work, but you don't realize, because it's probabilistic, that as soon as it matters, it can go off the rails. And if it does, right, the classic one was the Canadian Tire Company, right, or no, Canadian Travel Company, where they had an agent on their website who basically gave away free flights, right? And they just never did it in testing, but it did it in that scenario. So where I think the real opportunity is in enterprise use cases where the user is not is happy to have even 60-70% of their time back, and they're willing to handle the cases when it doesn't perform. However, and this is an area that we've spent a lot of time on, is really trying to, and to come back to what you said, really trying to say that for that 60-70%, have a system around these models that can confidently tell you, or basically measure confidence, to say, like, in this case, we are highly confident that it has produced the right answer. is instead of basically kind of rolling the dice and just leaving it to the end user to kind of figure out if it's right, because in that case now you haven't saved people time. If I have to still review every result, right, then I'm still in too much in the loop. But what I want to be able to do is say, here is a task, right? Here is how you should judge if the task is correct. And now you go off and now, with guardrails, figure out, what was correct and what was accurate. And then if you're not confident, then come back to me, right?
So, but
And
by the way, so listener may look at your LinkedIn profile and go, well, of course he's working on data related applications because he came from Snowflake, right? So, and yeah, let's set aside. So you mentioned earlier, right? So there,
but that's then that's critical, right? I mean,
but
part
but
of yeah.
but let's set aside the fact that, like you mentioned earlier, right? So the AI investment associate, right? So and things like that. Let's focus on the data applications in particular, because I want to get a feel for that, particularly in financial services. So obviously, you guys started this company uh, and focus on data applications, right? Of AI. Um, so what's been the response in the
It's been
market?
huge. So we are focusing just specifically
Yeah,
on the data engineer
yeah,
persona.
yeah,
So we're not trying to kind of, replace the investment banker. We're not trying to replace the equity trader. We're not trying to replace
and
the claims adjuster.
and the
Right?
difference between the data engineering persona and those other personas is what at a high level?
That the most comical one is I've never met a data engineer. I've been one, sold to them, have many friends there. I've never met a data engineer who doesn't want to give you his job to do.
Yeah,
Like they
or
all
it's not fiddling around with automation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
It is this something about this space, which is a cross between coding and data semantic understanding and business understanding, that is like there's a great meme of one of Bart Simpson's friends that no one knows his name, and he has a shirt on that says, I'm the AI, I'm the data engineer, and no one knows my name. Right? The only way that people find out who the data engineer is when things break. So because of that persona, this hits every single time. I mean, the only feedback we get when we're introduced to customers are, if this works, this is a no-brainer.
now,
Versus going after the financial analyst who want that job,
yeah,
and that's in high demand, and basically saying like, I don't want to be replaced. Data engineers are happy to move on to other things because they always have more to do
yeah.
than they have time for.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so a listener may say, well, that may not be a great idea because you're building tools and selling it to the people who may get displaced by the tools you're selling them. But the reality is, listeners, data engineers, as Matthew said, they have more to do than they have time in the day for, and
And
they
they'd rather do more business impacting tasks,
yeah.
right? Trying to track down why a pipeline is all of a sudden breaking, trying to figure out how to add a new cleansing a new entity resolution into the pipeline, fiddling with tools, like I said, like these are just tasks that, just bog them down, versus saying like, I have my CMO wants to run more campaigns. I need to get these feeds through so they can drive more customer, less customer churn. That's what they want to focus on. They don't want to focus on the mechanics of having to figure out, how to code, with this new framework, or how to, kind of optimize my 12 different ways I'm calculating revenue into one, right? Or creating a new semantic model. The other one is that they want to focus on building the AIs that are going to be facing off to their business users, so that and like the expression that always drove me crazy, I think Databricks and Snowflake both use this term, is that you have to have like a solid kind of data platform and a data strategy, before you can do AI. I think that's a completely false statement. You should be using AI to get your data in good shape so you can do more AI, right?
So let's see. So the data engineer, obviously, people associate data engineers mainly with pipelines, right? So I mean, they do many things, but that's one of the major things that they do. So uh, years ago, actually, I started thinking about, and now finally, more and more people are talking about it. Particularly the folks at Bauplan are talking about, injecting software engineering rigor into data engineering and building pipelines, right? So, but
Yep.
now you're talking about automation and vibe coding to some extent, right? So, doesn't so it might introduce a lot of new personalities into the data engineering space that may not have kind of that software engineering or more rigorous background. So what are some of the things that people have to be careful about as they introduce more of these AI capabilities and automation tools, particularly if now you're expanding the pool of your data engineers to people who are not data engineers.
Yeah, I don't think data engineers are going away. I
Yeah,
think if anything, this is just going to give them superpowers.
yeah.
But the way the customers that we're working with see this is effectively like as if they had hired a a team of junior data engineers that could now
So
work.
it's not like Matthew. I'm going, oh, because of Matthew's tools, I can take an analyst and assign and turn them into a
Absolutely not.
data engineer.
Absolutely not. If anything like that, I think that is a completely false narrative. Um, we sell to data engineers. We empower data engineers. We basically make them rock stars.
Actually,
And
actually,
basically,
uh,
yeah.
actually, let's make it concrete. So, all right. So, I start using Genesis, and now I want to build a pipeline. So, how does it work?
Yep. So you basically would describe what you're trying to do as if you were, assigning it to a new junior engineer.
Like a
You
prompt,
basically kind of
as a
you
prompt.
you you would provide a prompt or a document that is, this is what I'm trying to do. Right. I'm trying to produce this report. Typically, I mean, think about how business users would typically say is like, I have this report. I want to produce this new Tableau dashboard for
And,
my campaigns.
and
Right.
now, what Databricks and Snowflake will go. Okay, that's great, but you need our catalog,
You need the catalog. You
right?
need to
So,
get the data in. You need to get the data ingested from wherever it is. You need to ration. So basically, but you would start with the business requirement, which is
right.
like, I want to produce this report,
Mhm.
right? At that point, you would basically, so we have an agent who basically kind of onboards the project. Her name is Eve, Genesis Eve. And at that point, we have a set of pre-built, what we call blueprints that are involved. Think of them as like learned skills. I come back to the,
Based on my data platform. So it had access to my catalog, to my lake house and warehouses.
they do, but I think about the blueprint as the skill that's independent of your specific data,
Okay.
right? How do I, for my company, what are the tool set that I want to use? Right? Databricks, Snowflake,
Yeah.
whatever, right? What is the kinds of, do I want to use DBT or Spark pipelines or whatever?
Oh, so
These are the kind of,
you specify that.
you specify that as like, in a document, and then this document becomes the playbook that the system will use to take these business requirements and actually reliably guide these AIs through these multi-step processes with gaps along the way where the AI has to prove to the Genesis system that it has actually completed that step. Where most people fall down is if taking a relatively simple set of
But
steps
but
and assume that you can extrapolate.
But I'll need to provide Genesis access to, like I
Yeah.
said, my catalog,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
warehouse and
Yeah. So
warehouse.
yes, yeah. So a part of the onboarding, which would have happened before, is you install Genesis into your data environment,
Yeah.
into your Snowflake, into your Databricks, into your AWS environment, wherever, and connect them to your data sources, to your catalogs, to your external systems,
It
to
knows
your
it knows everything that a data
everything
engineer, a new data engineer would know, but maybe
exactly.
not an experienced data engineer who knows every nook and cranny, every business rule, every business rule, and
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. But where it gets interesting
yeah,
is that that acquired knowledge that you're alluding to,
yeah.
right, will be acquired
Over
by
time.
the system over time.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now, and this is the other thing, and this is it's not unique to data engineers, but I think there's something special about the institutional knowledge that is involved to keep these firms' enterprise data plants running is in multiple people's heads.
Yep.
And it's actually a terrible liability. And I've seen this firsthand with one of our early customers, where the head of it was a very small private equity firm, and the head of data engineering is burnt out because they typically do. It's a hard job. And we were there the day that he was leaving, and he was passing it off to the to his his remaining person on the team. And the guy who was leaving was literally, he was the happiest day I've ever seen him. Because but I knew all this knowledge was walking out the door, and we saw this view of terror on the guy who was inheriting this, trying to absorb by osmosis all he could about what happens on every other Thursday when this feed comes in
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
run right. So I think that, to me, is one of the real value propositions, is being able to, in an ambient way, acquire knowledge out of the people's heads and get it into the system, so that the next time a project starts, we don't have to reach out to Mary and ask Mary for the specifics on how do we kind of set up these particular pipelines. The system now has acquired it. And then the last piece of this, and this is, I think, critical,
So,
is we don't we don't run as a SaaS, right? We install our system inside the customer's environment, so that whatever knowledge the system is acquiring, the Genesis system is going to get smarter for that customer, but we are not. It's not leaking to us as Genesis, the company, and this is critical. Our customers basically win, because not only has this now been documented out of people's heads and into the system that they can read in natural language, but it securely becomes an asset that they can use for other projects, but even just more in general. We've had customers say that if all you did was produce, I mean, we do more than this, but if all you did was just take this stuff and create documents for their systems that they already have, like we had them at that. But obviously that, we do everything, from there.
by the way, so there's the notion of, okay, so I'm going to use your tool to as a more of a forward looking in the following sense, right? So I'm going to use your tool moving forward, my pipelines, I'm going to use your tool. Great. I get that. It's that example you gave of the guy retiring. It's that old institutional
Yes,
knowledge. I mean, there's only
that's
so
killer. That's
much you
killer.
can absorb. Uh, I mean, like in your example, the guy is literally leaving that day. How much could you have possibly absorbed on that one day? Unless he
Human to human, is it human to human? Almost,
unless he has had it written down, right?
which they never do. I mean, come
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
let's be serious, right? So yeah, I think that to me, I mean, this was an extreme example because it's a
yeah,
very lean team, but
yeah,
even more, bigger teams, the information tends to just be more dispersed,
yeah,
right? Each person has a piece of it, and then
yeah,
what happens is that person leaves, and you probably just let
yeah,
it go until something breaks, and then
yeah,
people kind of scramble.
yeah,
But like this ability to say, like, we're going to acquire this knowledge, and we're going to acquire it by reading the code, reading the documentation, and then when the system proposes something, and a human then says, no, 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 this is the way we define revenue here, that now becomes part of this kind of acquired knowledge. And then in this kind of end state, you'd imagine that now this kind of corpus of knowledge truly becomes, an asset where now it can find things because it's not dispersed in people's heads. It can say, like, wait a second, why are we calculating, our sales numbers, between these two different, regions in three different ways, right? All these kinds of things could now, or you can say, like, well, we have this code here, but the code that's defined in the pipeline is not consistent with the data that's in the database, right? And like just being able, which a human being would never get around to doing because they're just trying to do the minimum. I was actually talking to an investor about this, interesting. But the other thing is that data engineers, and actually I saw this at Goldman, there wasn't like a specific role for data engineers, right? You just had like very highly paid quants who spent like 70% of their job doing data engineering because they needed to, right? And they were the only ones who understood, the data. So of course they were the ones left doing this kind of grunge work and, monitoring kind of jobs they had to rerun when they didn't kind of produce the right result every other Wednesday. So this skill is actually, it's even worse than we described because it's like a part-time job for people it's not even something that they're even paid for, right? It's just something they have to do to kind of keep the lights on.
So there's also the two other examples that come to mind as you were talking there. One is, and this might be more specific to financial services, is legacy systems. I mean, COBOL and Fortran. I'm sure
Gold mine. It's a gold mine.
We, meaning you and me and all the listeners, without even knowing, are interacting with financial services systems that run on these legacy systems, right?
Yeah, it's
So,
terrifying.
and so the people who are maintaining those systems, they are dying off. And migration is not going to happen right away. So
Yeah.
does your system have?
Yes, and it's 100% a killer use case. We actually had an example of a healthcare company we're working with who had already signed on a traditional SI consulting firm for a massive migration project from like SAP, HANA, Oracle, Informatica, a whole bunch of legacy that they wanted to migrate. And the consultant, who I won't name, was at this for 6 months, and they were basically spinning their wheels for the problem, like I said, because no one, even that kind of technology, not mainframe, but still, it's gotten out where it's like most people don't understand it anymore, and they were just spinning their wheels and not making much progress. And they sort of brought us in and said, okay, well, let's see what you guys can make of it. Not us guys, the Genesis system. We came back and a week later. And they gave us like a subset of the problem that they were trying to work on. And basically, our system just read the code, right? And it's found, and I didn't know this, but evidently SAP does this kind of weird thing where it abbreviates certain types of fields with like German kind of abbreviations for things. I didn't know this. Evidently, the AI did. And it basically uncovered a piece of logic that was completely missed by the humans who have been working on this for 6 months. That was basically kind of used to kind of classify customers. So it's not only going to do the things that we don't want to do, or the people who are going to be in scarce supply. It's going to do it better. Like us humans, we don't want to read every piece of code and kind of translate everything. And it's not even like line by line coding. What makes these migrations hard, you don't really want to migrate line by line.
Yeah.
Right? You want to extract out, like, what the hell is this thing doing?
Yeah. What is it doing? And then
what is it doing?
That's what I want to migrate, right? So
yeah, I want to migrate and re-architect it with the latest and greatest way of doing this. Like, don't do the same kind of, row by row kind of, transformation. Do the entire thing in bulk, for God's sake. Or more like what happens in this case with this healthcare company. They had the same logic, of course, implemented 3 different ways, of course, right? They were all producing different results. So they wanted to they called it a migration project, but it was really a rationalization project. They're saying, like, I want to produce one set of results that are the right set of results and kind of throw away the ones that are the wrong ones. But the important thing about this is another reason why we can install in cloud, on-prem, or wherever, is what you want the agents to do is to be able to connect to the source system as part of the migration and actually interrogate the source systems to see, like, now that I've rewritten this, and I can and it's being rerun in this new way, does it match the results of the old system? And am I producing the right answers based on the documentation that I extracted as a critical step? Like, this is the other thing that I think, which again humans would never do, but our system always does, is we're never in those migrations converting code for code. To this point, the systems read the code, read the documentation if there is any, and then it produces human readable, system of record documentation that is now going to be used to produce this new code. And unlike any other human documentation I've ever seen, now you have documentation that will be always in sync with the code, as opposed to having it be these two different things that are moving at different speeds, because we always, even on new pipelines, right, the plan is it creates this kind of like documents that explain what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, how we're going to calculate things. Humans read this, verify this. The coding, I mean, 5 years ago, or well, definitely 10 years ago when we last spoke, the coding would have been the hard part.
Yeah.
Coding is the easy part, right?
Yeah.
Having AI generate code, as we know, that's easy. Having it generate the right code based on something that is now a well-documented and golden source of truth of natural language that us humans can opine on, and not just us coding humans. Right? Typically, what you want the business user to opine on this, not have to have the data engineer be the kind of go-between, right? You can say, like, this is the document. This is how we're going to calculate revenue now, right? Analyst person, CFO, is this correct? Great. That's what we'll generate the code for.
So let's go a little bit under the covers, right? So in that example, for example, that kind of that spec that your system produces, right? So
Yep.
Are you relying only on one model, or are you using multiple models to make sure that because none of these models obviously are 100% correct, right?
Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
the way, do you have your own models that you use, or you just use proprietary commercial APIs?
Commercial. So we use the commercial models. They are, for reasons that I still, and maybe your listeners will love to hear it afterwards, for reasons that I still don't understand, the frontier models continue to improve for this use case more than anything else we're seeing. Like, you can argue in the consumer space, they may plateau, they may kind of, it's harder and harder to measure the difference. Every single release that the top frontier models from Anthropic and OpenAI, it'd be interesting to see if Google is
And
now
now
in that.
Google's latest model is quite
Yeah,
good.
it's pretty impressive. So,
Yeah.
but this use case, something about it,
Yeah, because
it's leaps. Every single release is a leap.
yeah, because
And
it's something that they themselves use it for, number one. Number two, obviously, you have natural validators, right? So you can run the code and make sure it works. And then there's better data sets and benchmarks. But
I think so.
most of it is there's a lot of dog fooding
I think so.
involved,
I
right?
think you're right. But even more than regular engineering, data engineering specifically, because of the context you have to understand and the ability to know that, I mean, again, the agent performance. So the agents understand that they are going to not only acquire knowledge by running a query on a database or reading a document, but then making that change and testing a pipeline and understanding the impact that they've had. Like this, the way I think about it is that traditional software engineering it's like a stateless problem. right? You run the, I mean, I'm overgeneralizing, but typical programs, you can run the program, see the results, make a change, rerun the program, right? In the data world, there's there's side effects, right? You run
Yep.
something, right?
And that's the challenge, right?
That's
That's
the
why
challenge.
that's
That's the
why the
challenge.
whole thing that I mentioned earlier, which is there was this desire to inject software
I know.
engineering rigor to this particular problem, right? So,
And it's a great, I mean, and I think the way you'll get there is by AI taking us there. You're not going to change human behavior, particularly in a space that is just always under so much pressure to just rewrite into some, fantasy world of, of infrastructure as code for data. But AI can take us there, but it'll do so in a way because it'll inherit the current environment. And then over time, as it becomes more aware of the environment, then it can take us all on that path. But we don't have to have the people first try to introduce that rigor into their process. We can delegate that into these AI systems to be able to do that on our behalf.
by the way, one of the challenges, obviously, with data engineering, for example, in the classic example, pipelines is uh, unlike traditional software engineering, data engineering, you tend to touch multiple distributed systems along the way, right? So you might be starting out with a bunch of sensors, and then you're ingesting with Kafka, and then you're massaging with Spark, and I don't know. There's a lot of infrastructure that you have to have in place just in order to kind of mock up and test your pipelines. But obviously, you
Exactly.
can't do that on the production, so you're using some sort of test bed copy of your setup. So it's always complicated to mimic 100% what's happening in production, right? So, but going back to my earlier question, which is how many models do you use?
Yeah. So we typically we let the customers choose from the set of top tier models that
Okay.
we've tested on. Typically, it's going to, right, these
And
days,
they have their own accounts, you mean?
they have their own account. So they will either directly, directly to the Anthropic or OpenAI through Bedrock or Azure or through Databricks or Snowflake have access to it. So so we don't have to be a trusted party in any of that, but we will not let them use a model that's not top tier because they're just not going to get the performance that
And
they
so
need.
you're constantly evaluating.
Constantly.
So
Yeah,
you,
we're actually doing our own evals now that we'll publish in the near future. That basically, because I think none of the benchmarks really, as you know, none of the benchmark. Well, first of all,
yeah,
all benchmarments are gamed these days,
yeah,
so it's really
exactly.
really hard. But we're actually testing real system, real workflows, real with a benchmark for our system running through it, and yeah, it's.
So
I think it'll be helpful.
you may support Gemini at some point.
Yeah, we'll definitely support Gemini. I mean, in our early testing, it's very different. There's something very different about Gemini, and that that will require. And part of the way we do this when we onboard, we basically allow our system to understand how to behave differently for each of these models because they do behave differently. As another example, like Anthropic or the Claude 4.5 models are much more chatty in explaining to you each time they make a kind of tool call. They like to explain to you
And
why they're doing
much
that.
more expensive too.
Much more expensive because of it. There's a lot more. Where at least in the latest GPT 5.1, it actually is much less wordy, and hence gets to be much less expensive because of that. Now, in that case, you don't know necessarily why it made a decision, so you're giving up something there. Gemini seems to be much more in our initial testing is much more self-critical, and seems to be if for some and one of the things that we spent a lot of time we built hundreds of tools, the custom tools to do these different kind of actions. Because if the tools do not behave reliably, AIs have traditionally have a hard time with that, right? They're expecting to call a function that does X and it doesn't do X, right? Claude is much more adaptable if it doesn't, get a result that it needs. Gemini is not. Gemini, we've seen cases where it's like I called this function, it didn't do what I expected, and it starts to go a little bit insane because of that. So it's almost like too smart for its own good, saying like, why wouldn't it have done what I expected it to do? Because I read the documentation and I knew exactly what the function was supposed to do, and I didn't do it. So I think that's where we're going to have to like have different kind of controls around Gemini. But like the world of having the three big model providers effectively all kind of banging on each other to kind of
It's great.
Is amazing for us. And I think I think it's an amazing space.
Claude Code is, my experience is, it will brute force, you know,
Brute force is exactly the right word. It's exactly the right word.
It might cost you, right? So you're pretty happy that you got a result, and then you look at the bill. Oh God, What about do you get people who ask you about open weights, particularly the Chinese models? Is that are open weights models of interest, number one, and number two, are Chinese open weights models effectively no-fly zone for enterprise in the US?
At this point, people are just looking for performance.
Okay.
So where I think the big impact that the open weight models, particularly those from China, will have is just putting even more pressure on the other three to
And
just keep going.
Downward pressure on
downward
price
pressure on
too.
price.
Yeah.
And upward pressure on performance that they have to in order to justify the price, they have to really outperform. So I think it's going to be more of a second order effect. If we could walk into a customer and say like, we've got a 10 times cheaper model that performed as well. I mean, at the end of the day, the model is going to be hosted in Bedrock or something. The models are hosted in a will be hosted in a trust in Azure. It's not like you're going to be hosted in some server that you don't control.
Yeah.
But right now we're seeing zero kind of demand for anything other than the top tier, and the top tier, everyone is just like, give me the latest. As soon as Opus came out, give me Opus instead of Sonnet. Like people want to try Gemini. Like that's that's the world we're in. But the second order effect, I think, is powerful because whatever we can do to keep the pressure on, the more we can ride this wave. The important thing is though, we just have to, and I think this goes for the entire AI space. It really is a race in the enterprise to be there first, right? We want to be in a place so that our system has become so knowledgeable about an enterprise that if someone else comes along and thinks they can do data work better than us, they now have to not only be better for us feature for feature, but they have to be better than us with all the acquired knowledge that we've learned about the enterprise. And which has always been the case. You always wanted to be the first mover in enterprise, but it's even more so now because of how much of an advantage you get by being one of the first in the enterprise. Versus traditionally, you can say, well, I'm running this query faster, or I can do this workflow, a little bit better, right? It might be worth switching because the systems didn't really get knowledgeable about where they were deployed. AI systems, if they're designed correctly, get better over time about the enterprise that they're deployed with, and that's a competitive advantage that you just can't. It's really hard to compete against.
So there's Matthew. There's another class of startups that are going after, I guess, the business analyst persona, where their entry point is, I'm going to go into your warehouse, lakehouse, learn about your catalog, and then basically I can help your analysts or even non-analysts, just business people, start writing their own reports, and I guess over time I can imagine those same startups then starting to say, well, actually, we may need to help these people build pipelines because some of these ad hoc reports may not be served in a single warehouse or lakehouse. It might involve actually building a custom pipeline, right? So, do you see a future where kind of there's a convergence of these two? You're starting from the data engineer, these people are starting from the analyst, and then you end up both kind of overlapping.
Possible. I mean, I would. I challenge them to do that. I
But
think it's.
the class of startups I'm describing, right? So,
Yeah, I know. The BI, it's
yeah,
the
yeah.
BI flavor of the month kind of things that start with an AI prompt. Um, I think that's a very, very tough space for any startup to start from. I think it's going to be
And
harder and harder to differentiate, and it's
the
easier and easier to kind of enter that space. And it's
so the commonality with you is their starting point is you're starting with the data engineer, they're starting with the analyst, but their assumption is okay. So in a big enterprise like I don't know J.P. Morgan, right? So they're using everything. They're using Databricks, Snowflake, BigQuery, and so on and so forth. So all of these vendors have their own catalog, but I'm going to build a universal catalog of some sort. I'm going to understand the data more universally to better serve that analyst persona. And so, you're doing the same thing with the data engineer persona in the sense that they're using multiple systems. They're using Databricks, Snowflake, DBT, whatever, right? But you're gonna give a holistic understanding for the Databricks persona. So that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
no. I think they may try.
Yeah.
I think starting with the understanding of these complex environments and working towards the business user is going to be we're finding is much more compelling
Mhm.
than trying to kind of,
Go the
weed your
reverse.
way back
Yeah.
and trying to figure I mean, once you're here and you're
No, I,
trusted
I
and
agree.
you're,
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
I think it's again, people will try, I am
Yeah.
sure. It's hard. Right? And I think
No, no,
that's the
because
thing that,
it's a harder lift to go from okay, so I understand how to do the standard reports. Now I have to build this kind of bespoke report that requires a pipeline. But then that's a completely different universe over here, right?
yeah,
Whereas once you understand the pipelines, you can generate the reports.
exactly. I can make it easy, and I'll make it easy for
Yeah.
for these AI systems that are likely to talk to your data APIs and are gonna be commoditized in the data platforms, right? Databricks, Snowflake, AWS, they're all gonna have these kind of talk to your data functionality, right? Built in because it's or BI tools, right?
Yeah.
Tableau, they're just gonna have built in, right? Because and they're already good at doing the visualization. BI tools particularly, right? Their only chance of surviving is basically trying to leverage kind of their install base and their experience doing good visualizations and just trying to kind of add an AI, flavor to
But
that.
no, no, but I guess their thing is universality, right? So
I know, but
yeah.
but again, no, people don't
Yeah.
want universality. They want good visualizations that produce the right answer and don't give the CEO the wrong top line revenue when they ask, right? And I think it's the same thing. Like all the BI tools had this visions that they were going to kind of build into the pipeline space traditionally, right? And they all failed. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they
Yeah,
were
no,
just
no,
different kind of skill set, different innovators dilemma, different skill set. Um, we see this space, and particularly, the good place that we're seeing is that, because you're now having this overarching, with a common, like with Iceberg, and now you have like Databricks and Snowflake kind of, effectively providing like this cleaned up view of the world, right? It's now you can basically just feed that demand, and like I said, and pull in all these legacy kind of systems. We have talked to a customer now who has like a pile of legacy code that they don't even know what to do with, and they want to get it into this environment. Like all these Perl, they have a whole bunch of Perl code that they can't even find their engineers to maintain anymore. So like solving this problem of, like you said, it's not looking at one database and putting a catalog on it, right? It's, I mean, we were looking at ourselves. Even as a year and a half old startup, we have a pretty complex marketing data pipeline, right? That's pulling data from all these kind of systems and inbound and outbound systems, and some of it's feeding into Salesforce, some of it's being held internally, some of it's being loaded into a warehouse. Like, I mean, and we're just getting going, right? And like, okay, and if I wanted to like understand if it's doing the right thing, and like, I don't know, that's now a lot of engineer work to do that, right? This is something that it's like, this is something that human beings were never built for. We had to do just because the complexity just built over time, and we're lucky that there's now something that's going to get us into something forward, like you said, and put us into a place where this is maintainable, right? But not have to do it as people having to change their ways and rebuild things that's going to be thankless and no one's going to appreciate. Let the AIs do that stuff. Like, that's what they're good at.
So when you first come into a team or a company, right? So the way you describe it is usage is human in the loop, right? So in other words, so I'm going to build a pipeline. There's stages along the way where there's checks, right? So
Exactly.
why do you use the word agent then?
Oh no, because and that's a great question.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're not selling agents. Our system uses agentic technology
Okay.
to basically initiate those steps.
Okay.
So we give the agent, the set of tools they're going to use: run a query, build a pipeline, run DBT, call Spark, whatever it's going to be, right? And with this blueprint of the guardrails that it's going to do, and then we say go, and the system is going. So, and I think this is the other thing that
And
customers
then
will talk to.
there's a human that interacts with this.
This human, but importantly, the system escalates to the human
Yeah.
when necessary. It's not the human saying, okay, go forward.
Yeah.
It's the system going, and the human loop has to be, being requested,
Yeah.
not kind of, don't give me work to do. Just do the job, but stop and ask for help when you need
Yeah,
to.
yeah, because the whole point is I want I want the system to increase my productivity. I don't want it to create work for me. Right?
Exactly. I want time back. Time is the measure of success here, right? How much time are you freeing up in in a person, in an organization, so they can do other things? This is why I think part of the MIT study, which is struggling to see the productivity, is that it's the metric of measurement of impact is, I believe, flawed. Right, the measurement will be the only reliable measurement will be time saved, and the only way you're going to see this, in my opinion, is going to be by watching the hiring trends change. Right, take like a JP Morgan. I guarantee a JP Morgan is not going to be the same size company in 5 years. Right, it's just not. Right, and I think those are the kind of metrics, and they're harder to measure month to month. Which is what the study was trying to do. But like, that's the measurement of impact. That's the measurement that we are driving towards. Is that we're not selling you agents, we're not selling you tools, we're selling you time. Time saved, and particularly in a space where every data engineer I've met is basically said, like, give me time back. Like, don't give me something else to do. I got plenty to do, like you said.
I'll give you something else to sell.
Okay.
So besides time, how
Okay.
about capability expansion? Right. So I'm giving you more superpowers. Right. So I'm giving
I
your
like that. I
data.
like that. I like that.
I'm giving your data engineers uh, things to do
Capability.
that they normally could not do.
Yes, I like that.
Right.
Capability expansion is I like that a lot. That's
And
really good.
so, what is the reaction from the data engineers themselves when you first show them? I guess you said they like it, but surely you've been in engagements where there's been a bit of pushback. So what if there's any pushback, what would have been the pushback?
The only pushback we've gotten, and I'm being truthful here, is just skepticism that it's going to work.
Yeah.
It just, when we come in, it's just, I mean, even hearing myself as I'm explaining to you, I'm like, this is too good to be true, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only the main skepticism we get is like, this can't possibly work. I know how hard it is. My environment is super complex. I'm not in one clean, beautiful, curated catalog. I have legacy systems. I have, half my data is still in Salesforce and not migrated anywhere else, right? This can't possibly work, right? And it's like, well, if there's an API to those systems, and if a human being can be trained to do this, even if, I know this is like the mean, but even if these models don't continue to improve, which clearly they will, because of what we said, the race is on. These guys are going to push continually, and there's no end in sight. But even if they didn't, at the current capability level, we're already at, a junior level data engineer that systems can do anything a junior data engineer could do. So, assuming that is the case, right, then then of course I'm going to take this, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's cheaper than hiring a person. It works all night. I can run an army of them on multiple projects at the same time. They don't have to sleep, right? And I think the risk, and I've spoke about this on LinkedIn, is, and it's not just us, right? It's the entire AI wave and enterprise, is the jobs it's going to take out are not the jobs of the senior data engineer, right? It's the entry level guy.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the guys, those are jobs that are just going to disappear, because why do you need them?
Which means you lose that pipeline, right?
It's a problem. It's a real
right.
problem.
So basically, you don't
lose a
have,
pipeline. Yeah,
you won't have the entry level people to become senior people.
exactly. The pipeline is going to be missing of those people, and there's a social contract that is out there, right? Where I think it's global, but definitely in the U.S., where if you study hard and you get all the internships and you go to good schools and there's going to be jobs, right? And the worst part about it is that these schools are not teaching AI as a core skill, right? The CS program, sure, but I don't care about the CS program. I'm talking about the finance programs. I'm talking about the humanities programs, right? Are not teaching AI because it's hard to incorporate it without it being seen as cheating. So you're going to have these kids are going to graduate without the necessary AI skills. They're going to try to come to those jobs are disappearing. The only job that's going to be remaining are the more senior ones who require, like, do you know how to manage an army of agents to do that? Well, of course not. I didn't learn that. Sorry, right? So I think it's going to, and I don't want to end on a doom here, but I think part of the opportunity, I think you phrased it right, is we have to kind of get this into the education systems so that AI becomes a core skill, and it's a capability expansion. Like you said, like, this is a skill that a data engineer now with this skill becomes a super data engineer. And if you embrace that, then we will all move forward in progress. If we don't, and I'm going to do whatever I can, at least in our space here, to try to get that into the vernacular, because I think it's critical, because it's coming whether or not we want to do something or not. And I think we have a responsibility, at least in the areas that you and I and others who are listening can touch, to basically force people to use this, and you have to use it, right? There's skill in here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something you can kind of pick up as by analogy. You have to use it all the time and learn what it means to use this to become better.
And one of the key challenges, obviously, is the people who are the instructors, the professors, the teachers are not themselves
I know.
that familiar
Illiterate.
with
I
it,
know.
right?
This is the problem. This is a big problem.
So let me close with this, which is, I think there's one other pushback that you've gotten that's subtle, that maybe you it's not an actual pushback, right? So, but it's more of something that you probably have felt when you walk away from some of these meetings, which is the following, right? And this is a disease in general of data engineers, I think, which is this, right? So you present them Genesis, you go, okay, that's cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so we'll give you a call. And then after you leave the room, some of the data engineers in the meeting are going, man, that's great, but we can build that ourselves. And
Yep.
wouldn't it be cool to build it ourselves? And
Yeah.
obviously, the reason you don't build it yourself is you have to maintain it.
Have to maintain it. I've always seen this. I saw this in the data space too.
Right.
It was big,
That's a
right?
disease, right?
It's a disease, and
Yeah.
I come back to
Yeah.
if you can build a product
Yeah.
and you're going to make money from that product,
Yeah.
build it. And particularly in the AI age, like I could argue this is always the case, but even more now, like you said, A, you have to support it,
Yeah.
and B, I guarantee someone building a product for revenue
Yeah.
will always build it better than whoever's building it internally for cost. Even before you talk about the support cost, which you're right, dwarfs everything else.
Yeah.
But just think about like the quality difference. I remember back in my days at Goldman, before they had embraced the cloud, they had our own internal private cloud. And it basically, there was the equivalent of EC2,
Yeah.
the equivalent internally. And you press it and you provision it. It would take whatever 3 months instead of 3 minutes to kind of get the machines. And they basically got a form. And like I said, the quants were the data engineers. So one of these quants got the form 3 months later and went to basically apply, their machines. And they saw like duplicate mount points or something. And they figured my 10 machines, he didn't recognize one of the mount points. He deleted one of the mount points and hit apply. Figured, if it doesn't work, it's only my 10 machines. Well, no one had ever done that before. And obviously this dialogue had written, for minimal cost. He hit that button, took out half a Goldman. And I basically went up to the guy who did it. And I'm like, well, if it's any consolation, I heard that AWS had a similar problem recently. And he's like, really? And I'm like, of course not. Right? Because in AWS, every second that it's down is money.
Yeah.
So maybe they had that issue for the first 5 minutes they released, but I guarantee everything has been optimized because it's revenue. So it is a disease. We actually don't see it that often because the way people view it is like, listen, even if you have ideas of how you could do this, learn from us, right?
Yeah.
We'll show you what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll feel like it's good. It's more than you would have done, which is where we tend to land. But worst case, you'll learn about the stuff that you were going to hit if you try to do it on your own. So it's like a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't you go on a journey with it? But you're right, it is a disease, but honestly, not as bad as I would have thought.
Yeah, yeah. And in closing, to the managers who are listening out there, obviously this is the old build versus buy conversation, but particularly now, which ties back to the previous point that Matthew made, which is, people want to learn how to use these AI tools. So you really need to discern if someone is really volunteering to build something so they can learn to build with these AI tools and then leave your team after they build it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just think about, is it core to my business? Build. It was always been the case, but even more in the AI age, build only the things that are core to your business. Anything else, you should find someone who it's core to their business and pay them for it. Like everything has a cost, right? And the dependencies you think you're removing by not depending on someone else is now going to bite you because you have to support it, maintain it, and the pace that this stuff is moving, it's a constant race to keep up the latest models, the latest capabilities, the latest wave of you now want it to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Why not find the experts in this space? People who've lived in a particular space, and that's what I would also leave your and I would not say just in the data space. You should hire the company or the product where the people in that space are experts in that space, right? Hire Harvey for law because the people behind Harvey are lawyers, right? They understand the problem, right? hire Genesis because not only our tech is cool, but we've lived in the data space. We know the problems you're going to face. But I think that's going to matter more than ever. And again, if there's something core to your business that is going to give you a differentiated advantage, build it because you can build it now faster than you ever could. But like to your point, realize it's not going to be built for once. It's going to have to be supported forever. And you have to make sure that supported forever is core to your business.
And with that, thank you, Matthew.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.